who gave you permission to do what you have done?
Infinity, what does that mean?
Cool. So we're talking with Molly Barker, who is the founder of Girls on the Run. And Molly, I would love it if you would kind of explain what that means to you and kind of how you came to start creating this thing that didn't exist before.
Sure. So I'm the founder of Girls on the Run, and to a third, fourth, and fifth grader, that means I'm the inventor. So a lot of the kids think that founders are dead people. So I'll take inventor just fine. And founder to me, I'm not sure that's actually the title I might give myself. I might even say more like a sculptor, you know. So what happens is I had an idea, and I needed to bring that idea to life. So it's in my head, and somehow I had to bring it out into physical form. So it's a little bit like starting with a piece of unfinished wood and chipping away until you get to the thing. So I could see what I wanted, but it took quite a bit of time before it became Girls on the Run. So it's almost like founder, you know, I found it, but it was more about revealing, you know, revealing what I believe was already there. We just had to get it into a form other people could attach themselves to.
Mm-hmm. Where did the idea first come from for you?
So I think it's been in my being since I was a kid. So there's a lot of research that shows that innovative sort of social entrepreneurs, which is what I am, often ask these really complicated questions even when they're kids. So they're always, you know, like, why is the sky blue? And just these sort of, infinity, what does that mean? You know, and I've always been a person very curious about really big questions. And so from the very beginning, I was always kind of wondering, so why are girls portrayed or sort of put into a certain stereotype? When I went into middle school, I didn't fit the stereotype. So that didn't make sense to me. I struggled for a good number of years, 15, 16, 17, trying to conform to that stereotype. And finally, when I was 32, just realized I can define girl on my terms. I don't need to have our culture, organizations, anything else define it. I can decide what that means to me. So it was both a personal revelation and starting the program to give girls those tools to define girl on their terms. So a lot of it was, actually many creative, innovative people such as myself have to go through some really hard times in order to be fearless in paving the way.
So was there an intentional plan? Did you say to yourself at some point, like, I'm going to be a social entrepreneur and I'm going to create, was it like that? Or did something just happen?
It was not like that, although there are some people now, there's a whole field around social entrepreneurial ideas. So there are people that say, hey, I want to change the world. I'm going to do that. Back when I started Girls on the Run, this conversation didn't exist really. So what I did was I wanted to do something for girls, and so I just started it where I could, and I always encourage even my own children, start where you can, begin where you are. So I went to the school where I used to teach high school and said I'd like to do this after school program with these little girls, and the after school coordinator couldn't be happier, so he said, let's do it. So the first year there were 13 kids in it, and a lot of people are interested or kind of curious about the curriculum, how that came to be. So I had written down a list of lessons in advance, but really only by title, only by skill set, and then wrote the curriculum as we went through it with these 13 girls. Mm-hmm. So I'd do one lesson with the girls, and then I would write the second lesson, after that one, and then I wrote the third, and then I wrote the fourth, and on we went. And so the curriculum has changed and is continuing to change to keep relevant, but the core of it is still very the same, sort of the structure of how the lessons are set up. So 13 girls came, and I would have been completely content with that. Like, it was very amazing. But then 13 told 13 other girls, and then we had 26, and then they told more girls, and then it was like, wow, I think we're onto something here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I had to surround myself with lots of other people to help grow and sustain the organization.
What do you think was, for you, the key to it being a few to many?
I think, and I'm a member of a fellowship called Ashoka, which is a fellowship of social entrepreneurs. And having spent time with other people like myself, even you included, based on the even small conversation we had, I think at our core, people yearn for the three things that Girls on the Run gives, which is that being emotionally safe, being able to express ourselves, being connected with other people, and not connected by cellular devices, but like really connected, and then loved. I mean, it's not that complicated. And I think a lot of the greatest movements in the world, all of them actually have those components, the lasting ones. I think there are short-term ones that are based on anger or maybe fear, but the long-lasting ones are grounded in those three things. And that's what Girls on the Run is. Mm-hmm.
When you were 16 years old, 15, 16, in that kind of freshman, sophomore experience of life, what did you think was going to happen in your life? Did you have a plan or a vision?
So there were two parts of me, and these two parts began to reveal themselves. Actually, it's not two parts. I was split in two. So around 11, the age of 11, I just started to split in two. So there was the part of me that wanted to be so accepted by other people, right? And so that's where I began to partake in a lot of behaviors that were sort of status quo. I started, partying, started, wanting to be popular, kind of just follow along with what everybody else was doing. There's nothing wrong with that, because I had to do that in order to learn. But then there was this other split part of me that was that empowered self, like the one that asked those deep questions, that could see into my and everyone else's strengths. I was very inspired by others, leadership. I was just this strong girl. And I found her when I ran. That's why running was very important to me, that physical strength. And these two split persons existed, oh my gosh, in a big way when I was 15 and 16. I wanted to have the boyfriend. I mean, a lot of this was my generation too, growing up in the South. But it was really important to be pretty, to have the boyfriend, all the things that there's nothing wrong with those things, but they became incredibly important. But inside, I knew all along there was this other, stronger me that was wanting to get out as well. So I was kind of split in two. If you looked at me, you'd seem like the student council president, but on the inside, I still felt kind of not good enough. So there was sort of this constant battle, there.
Were you thinking at all about what I want to be when I grow up, or where do I see myself going career-wise?
Yeah, I was. And I at the time, this is funny, I thought at the time I wanted to be a veterinarian and work with animals, because I just loved animals. And I think part of when I look thematically at my life, the things that I've done in it have all been around these safe places. And animals to me are like the most unconditional, loving creatures on the planet, And I wonder if at some point I wasn't seeking that for myself. It was safe to work with animals because they just love you. So, that was my first thought. But then I ended up going into teaching and wanting to create that space for the students. So it's always been around. My big thing has been about being a creator of space, holding the space for other people to express themselves.
So what has been compass points or ways that you've found your direction into, from being that 16-year-old girl who was a split personality, we'll call it, although that's not really true, but to being the woman that you are now? What has been that force or that idea, or even the people in your life that have been the compass to help you figure out, that's me, that's not me?
That's a really good question. And I think that I'm still trying to figure that out. There are, so I know for me now, I know a lot more and I know a lot less than I did when I was, starting Girls on the Run.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know this for certain. When I am engaged fully in what it is that I'm doing, and that means I almost become unaware of myself while I'm doing it. That's a good thing. So like when I am working with the girls, when I'm in the presence of a young woman, I lose track of myself because I'm so present with her. And that is, I think of all the times, and when I was writing the curriculum, there is this, it's almost being blissed out. Just I'm so focused that the rest of the world falls away. And those compass points have been I kind of stop daily now and I say, no, where are those points for me? And I really try to spend time there. I create that space for myself. I'm not sure if that made sense.
What I'm hearing you say is, when I'm in that blissed out place, mm-hmm. I know that's right.
Yes.
And whatever I can do to be in that place more, mm-hmm. that's what I'm going after.
Yeah, and I'll say that it's interesting, sometimes in our culture, it's easy to confuse blissed out with like zoned out through alcohol, other drugs or certain other activities, But for me, those places are, as I've gotten older, I've become more keenly aware of when that's happening and when I'm being fooled by the status quo to think I'm being blissed out. You know what I mean? So, it's a heady thing to win an award, right? Woo, you win an award, but that's not the kind of blissed out I'm talking about. The other one is like just where you're so present, and those things are all, some of them are negative, using drugs and alcohol, for me anyway, is not the way to get blissed out. I'd rather do all this without any influence like that.
Has there ever been a time where you have felt lost, confused, overwhelmed by life? One thing that I hear a lot from people, and it generally comes in later high school and into college and even after college. They've graduated, have this degree, and now they go, oh, man, I don't know. I feel lost. I don't know what to do. Has there ever been a time when you have felt lost like that and had to figure out your way through?
Do you know that I think so part of my story is I started running when I was about 15, and I also started drinking, partying. But that partying turned into addiction. So it wasn't just fun anymore. It got to where, alcohol abuse and addiction became part of who I was. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, I never did feel lost because I had numbed out. I didn't let myself. So anytime I had that feeling of being lost or scared or kind of what am I doing, I just zoned out using, alcohol. And so I think what happened was my moment of sort of figuring out I was lost when I got sober at age 32, which was interestingly about 3 years before I started Girls on the Run. Mm-hmm. So it was like those 3 years of just trying to figure out who I was I was lost. But by the end of those 3 years, began to see who I was, and so hence was able to start Girls on the Run. So now, I go through big periods of like what's going on, and I actually delight in those because I know at the end I have faith that it's a breakthrough, like something amazing is on the other side of this loss. We have to lose things in order to receive. We have to get rid of stuff in order to make room for something new. And so now I really don't have a lot of fear about them. I mean, they're uncomfortable, but it's like, oh, good, something else is coming.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
And one reason why I think I really want to do these interviews is to find people who are great and have conversations where they just talk about what's real for them and kind of dispel the myth that you just wake up one day and you just have it all together.
It's so true. You know, I was thinking the only difference between me and any other, like other people, the only difference is we've been able to quantify what I've done, because when I started Girls on the Run, there was a roster. You know, there were 13 girls, and then there were 26, and then there were 75. This year, the program has reached its millionth girl, and the reason we know that is because there's data. The guy, I mean, I'm being honest. Everybody influences 1 million people in their lifetime. We're all capable of that with how we smile at someone, you know, the way we acknowledge another person. So if you were able to chart all the people that, you know, we've all influenced, it's probably in the millions, right? You know, you influence one person and they influence someone else. So that's where the greatness comes in, you know, is that it's just been quantified. I'm not taking away from what Girls on the Run is about, but I just started with 13 girls, and that would have been enough. And that's what I like to tell to, like, young people. With 13 people, those people then go on and work with, you know, who knows your influence. It's tremendous.
And yet, do you know how what you're saying runs counter to what so much of our society is telling young people right now?
Yeah.
Not young people, all people.
Everybody.
Is that you need to claim some great story about who you are, or you will be swept away into a river of anonymous has-beens and forgotten.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, like, we're not, you know, when I sit by the beach or in the mountains, you know, and look out, I realize how unimportant I am and how important I am, both in the same moment. You know, so it's that, you know, I'm unimportant in the scheme of things, but I'm so important with how I live my life, you know. And I think I speak often of this with the younger high school folks, is the wake of our life begins now, you know, the wake like behind a boat, you know. So when you're building it. This is your impact is that great. It's just small now because you haven't lived long enough. But the longer you live, as long as you're doing good and being kind and doing that, your weight gets huge. By the time you're my age, you know, you've influenced a lot of people. And what do you want the influence to be, a positive one or not?
If you could give advice or insight to young people who are trying to figure out how to do something meaningful with their lives, but they just don't know what or how, where they're going, or how to even figure out up and down right now, what would you say to them?
So it is counter what is being said to them. I would say, if you can, it's called a practice, building in a practice of stillness. So I would say every day, and if you can't do it every day, do it when you can. Sit somewhere without any noise, no cell, no nothing. And if it can be outside, that's even better. And sit there for, if you got 10 minutes, do it. If it's 30, and just sit there. Because I call them winks from the other side. And then if you can, I would jot down whatever thoughts you had. But I noted, and I have found journals from when I was 15, 14, 13. Every one of them, it's so cool. When I line all those dots, they all brought me to Girls on the Run. It makes me want to cry. You know, but had I, you know, there was a period of time I numbed out, right? I didn't want to know about all, I didn't want to listen to the power I had. So I would do that. And the answers are there. It's just we just don't slow down long enough to look or see them or hear them. Does that make sense?
So much more than you may realize for me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, Molly, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. This is bliss for me. It's bliss for me to have the chance to have this conversation with you, and it's bliss to imagine that other people may pop in and hear some words and walk away and float in the wake that we've just created. So, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, you're welcome.